The story begins with a literal bang as Miss Surya, upon laying eyes on Mr. Shin, the first prince of Midland, promptly faints. The workers around her are instantly thrown into panic, and Shin stands there, completely baffled. He thinks to himself that she has just screamed in his face and fainted, wondering what on earth is happening. Without hesitation, Shin rushes over to the unconscious Surya, kneeling down like the gentleman he is. He asks aloud, concerned, what is wrong. A nearby worker, attempting to manage the situation, steps in to apologize profusely, explaining that Miss Surya's health is not great today and suggesting they reschedule the tea party. Shin is at the Duke's mansion for his engagement with Miss Surya, thinking it's time to secure his own engagement since his sister is marrying into another country. He watches as his fiancée faints. A scene shifts to Shin face-to-face with the Duke himself, Surya's father, who is all apologies, expressing his deep regret over the unfortunate situation. Shin, waving off the apologies with a casual air, assures the Duke that it is no big deal. He even adds that since Miss Surya is only 10 years old, it is perfectly normal for a child to fall ill from time to time. The Duke, visibly distressed, suddenly bursts out, insisting that Surya neither has a deadly disease nor a weak body and has been perfectly fine until now. Shin, attempting to calm the Duke, reassures him and advises him to stay with Surya while she recovers, adding that he will wait for their next appointment. As Shin exits, trying to leave the awkwardness behind, his personal guard, Shurigan, chimes in, asking what is wrong and commenting on how brief the meeting has been. Still processing the events, Shin mutters under his breath, questioning whether his face is hideous. Shurigan, perhaps jokingly, says he would create a harem if he had Shin's face. Shin, rolling his eyes, tells him to cool it, reminding him there's a lady present. Realizing this, Shurigan loudly introduces himself to Miss Surya's maid, Belle, as a king's guard knight under Mr. Shin. Belle, staying professional, curtsies and introduces herself as Surya's maid, apologizing for the day's events. Shurigan, now serious, asks what happened. Belle explains that Surya fainted upon seeing Shin's face. Shin, internally mortified, glares at Shurigan, daring him to comment. Sensing the tension, Belle quickly assures Shin that Surya's fainting was just an accident and pleads with him not to leave. Shin, back in his princely mode, reassures Belle that he has no intention of abandoning Surya, especially since they haven't even spoken properly yet. Shurigan, still himself, asks Belle if she would scream upon seeing Shin's face. Belle politely responds that, in her opinion, Shin is as lovely as an angel. She cheekily adds that if she were 10 years younger, she might join his harem as well. Meanwhile, Shin, exasperated, wonders why everyone assumes he is going to have a harem. Later, in the carriage ride back, Shin asks Shurigan if he knows anything about Miss Surya. Shurigan shrugs, remarking that he has heard she is a spoiled girl, but that is typical of noble daughters. He then switches the conversation to what really matters to him, how impressed he is by the maid who wasn't scared of him. Shin, rolling his eyes again, can only think about how skewed Shurigan's priorities are. Back at the castle, Shin encounters his sister, Saran, who is running around in a dress. Shin asks her to stop, but she casually responds that it's her home too. She then asks about his fiancée, and Shin explains they didn't meet because she was sick. Saran suggests that if the girl isn't healthy, charming, or able to bear children, Shin should reject her. Flustered, Shin dismisses it as a coincidence, saying it's nothing to worry about. Saran laughs and reassures Shin that she will marry and spread their country's bloodline in Harfa. Shin, uncomfortable, changes the topic by asking if she's met her fiancé. Saran says she has, but it was years ago, so she barely remembers him. Lost in thought, Shin reflects on how much his sister has done for their country, setting up an orphanage and taking care of children, and now she's marrying someone she can barely recall. Saran, sensing his mood, explains that noble marriages are about duty, not love, though she still plans to love her husband when they marry. She urges Shin to do the same with his future spouse. Shin promises to keep that in mind. A few days later, Shin returns to the Duke's mansion, flowers in hand, determined to see Surya again. Belle greets him at the door and leads him to Surya's room. As soon as he enters, Surya, disheveled and embarrassed, apologizes profusely for her appearance and for what happened the other day. Trying to ease her nerves, Shin tells her to raise her head, assuring her that he is partly to blame for visiting while she is still recovering. As he looks at her more closely, he is struck by her beauty, realizing she is far too stunning to hide. The conversation takes an unexpected turn when Surya declares she wants to break off the engagement. Shocked, Shin asks why, and Surya explains that she doesn't think she's fit to be his fiancée or a queen. Teasingly, Shin asks if it's really his face that's the issue. Horrified, Surya denies it, but the embarrassment lingers. In an attempt to shift the mood, Shin offers her the bouquet of flowers, saying he has picked them from the royal garden and would be delighted for her to have them. Shin stood there, bouquet in hand, watching Surya remain completely silent, her expression unreadable. He tries to break the ice, casually saying that he also brought a cake, hoping to lighten the mood. He suggests they eat together with a cheerful smile. Surya immediately jumps up, eager to help, offering to grab some plates, but Shin waves her off, saying there is no need for that. He places the cake down in front of her with a grand flourish, commenting that they should just eat. As Shin is about to take a bite, he notices something is off. Glancing at Surya, he sees that she looks absolutely miserable, her face a portrait of worry and sadness. Confused, he panics internally, wondering what is making her cry. Surya, sensing his concern, quickly apologizes. Shin, being as polite as one can be, asks her if she hates the cake. Surya immediately shakes her head and Shin presses on, asking her what's wrong then. Surya, still upset, reveals that she has seen this exact event before. Shin, confused, asks what event she's referring to. Surya explains that she remembers everything. This world is from a game. Baffled, Shin repeats her words in disbelief, asking if she means a game like cards or chess. Surya sighs and tries to explain it in simpler terms. She asks if he has ever heard of a simulation game. Shin, still utterly clueless, replies that he has not. Surya goes on, explaining that a simulation game is where you play as a character in a story. Shin, trying to connect the dots, likens it to Sugoroku, clearly thinking he's cracked the code. Surya, however, clarifies that she's talking about a console game, where you control the main character and your actions influence the world. And then she drops the bombshell. She has played this game before, and the world they are in now is the same as the one from the game she played. Looking even sadder, Surya revealed that she had died once and was reborn into this world. She wasn't from this world at all. Shin's brain nearly short-circuited at the complexity of it all. He asked what she meant, still struggling to wrap his head around it. Surya explained that she had lived a past life in a country called Japan. Shin, even more confused, asked if she had memories from that life. Surya confirmed, and Shin noted that she was born into a ducal family 10 years ago. Surya nodded and explained that seeing his face had triggered all her old memories, causing her to faint. Shin, still overwhelmed by the sheer weirdness of it all, smiled weakly, reminding himself that he had promised to love and protect her. But all he could manage to say aloud was that it was complicated. Internally, he was screaming to be careful about what he said next. Surya shared that her body was frail in her past life, rarely attending school and often bedridden. Shin awkwardly noted she seemed healthy now, except for fainting. Surya explained her illness worsened, leading to her death at age 10. When Shin asked if it was just a dream, Surya assured him it felt real, not like a dream. Shin asked how Surya knew this world was from a game. Surya explained that she had played many games while in the hospital, including this one. Shin thought it sounded like Chunabu stuff, where people have this thinking that they are the chosen protagonist of a game. Despite his internal doubts, Shin decides to be understanding and supportive of Surya. When she asks if he believes her, he tells her to call him just Shin and assures her that he does believe her, adding that it's an interesting story. However, her face clearly indicates she doesn't trust him and has a suspicious look. He wishes he could apologize and run away. Surya then explains the game's plot, where the heroine at 15 transfers to a noble-only school called Flora Academy despite being a commoner. Shin, trying to be helpful, points out that Flora Academy is a real school where he will soon enroll. Surya continues, explaining how the heroine, despite her hard work, is bullied by the nobles. Shin, ever the gallant knight, declares that if he had been there, he would have done everything in his power to stop the bullying. Still trying to understand the appeal, Shin asks if it's really fun to play as a tragic heroine in this game. Surya ignores his question and continues with the story, explaining how, as the bullying worsens, others start helping the heroine and eventually, she falls in love with one of them. Shin, confused, asks if having multiple people help her means she's two-timing. Surya clarifies that the heroine can only pick one out of 7 potential love interests. 7 people? Shin exclaims, shocked. Surya reassures him that since the heroine can only pick one, it doesn't count as cheating. Surya, with a calm tone, states that the heroine can only choose one target character, so it doesn't count as cheating. She then explains further, if the heroine has already chosen her target, the other guys get mad at her. Shin, visibly uneasy, interrupts, asking her to stop with the target and character talk, saying it sounds way too much like a game. He argues that no guy would ever hate a girl just because of something like that. For a guy to truly hate a girl, she'd have to do something that actually warranted it. Unfazed, Surya says it's just game logic. If the heroine ends up marrying her chosen target after graduation, it's a good ending. If she's hated by all of them, she gets expelled. That's the bad ending. Then she describes the best ending. The heroine meets a prince, shares multiple events with him, they fall in love, become a couple, marry, and she becomes a princess. She continues, painting the scene of the graduation party, where, in front of all the guests, the prince publicly condemns his fiancée, breaks off their engagement, and chooses to marry the heroine instead. Shin, shocked, blurts out that the prince already had a fiancée. How could he just do that? He calls the prince terrible, says it's blatant cheating, and insists that no matter how you look at it, he's in the wrong. Listening silently, Shin eventually mutters that marrying a prince doesn't necessarily mean a happy ending. A prince has a duty to his people. That's why marrying a noblewoman is important. It's not something commoners should get dragged into. Then a realization strikes him. He turns to Surya and asks if she's the heroine. Before he can say more, Surya, eyes lowered, tells him he's mistaken. Confused, Shin repeats the word, mistaken. Her expression darkens. She reveals that she's not the heroine. She's the prince's fiancée, but one who got condemned. Her engagement was broken off and she was exiled. The pieces fall into place. Shin realizes the horrifying truth. He is the cheating prince, the absolutely terrible, thoughtless prince. He's stunned, ashamed that he did something like that to the girl sitting beside him. Surya continues, saying that she's the so-called Villainess, the noble lady everyone labels as the villain. She explains that in the game, the prince is kind, admired by everyone, treating all students equally regardless of class. Shin says that kind of behavior is expected. School is where everyone's supposed to be treated the same. But Surya quietly adds that the prince ignored his fiancée and fell in love with the heroine instead, and in doing so made her, the fiancée, into the villain, blocking their love. Shin, now thoroughly disturbed, thinks how terrible of a person he is. Surya continues, saying that she, as Surya, becomes jealous of this and starts bullying the heroine, which makes the prince hate her even more. Shin feels crushed. This revelation leaves Shin deep in thought. Stripping away someone's status, exiling them, placing them under house arrest, those are extreme punishments, especially for a student. He doesn't think anything a student could do would deserve such a punishment. After a moment of contemplation, he declares that if this is the way things are, why not change it? Surya, confused by his words, asks him to explain. Shin suggests that if she can change the way she acts, wouldn't everything be fine? Surya, sounding helpless, replies that she can't stop him, the prince, from falling in love with the heroine. Shin, trying to comfort her, says that if that's the case, she can just stay away from the heroine. Surya admits she doesn't know if that would work. She doesn't even know if they can change the game's story or if it's already set in place. She adds that if it's impossible, she'll be exiled and her family, the Colettes, will suffer the consequences. For the Villainess, there is no happy ending. Shin, filled with concern, thinks to himself that he doesn't want his fiancée to suffer like that. But something still feels off to him. He wonders if it's really fair to condemn her for something she hasn't even done yet, and then to turn down the engagement. It seems too unreasonable. After a moment of hesitation, he voices his doubts about how this might all just be a massive delusion. Surya, however, firmly replies that he is wrong. Shin, unsure how to proceed, thinks to himself that asking her for proof now would just be pathetic. Before he can say anything else, Surya speaks up again. She tells him that he'll surely remember this. When he was 7 years old, he went outside the castle by himself through a hidden passageway. Shin, startled, thinks to himself that she's right. He does remember it. Surya explains that the passageway is meant to be used only in emergencies, and no one but the royalty knows about it. Shin is amazed and puzzled by how she knows such a secret. Surya continues her story, telling him that while walking around the town, he notices a group of children messing around with the cat. Shin, now visibly shaken, confirms that this is true. Surya reveals that the cat is defended by a girl who is being bothered by the boys. In shock, Shin asks if she is the girl, but Surya shakes her head, explaining that the girl didn't have black hair like her. She continues, recalling that Shin yells, "It's shameful to bully a girl." Afterward, he is beaten up by the boys, but then the guards come to his rescue. Shin, listening intently, thinks to himself she's right. Surya tells him that after the incident, he laughs it off and tells the girl how he had become her knight. Embarrassed, Shin cringes internally at the memory and wonders aloud how she knows all of this. Surya reveals the truth. It is the opening event of the game. It plays every time the game starts. Shin, still blushing with embarrassment, stammers in disbelief every time. Shin admits that he should be the only one who knows about this. Surya nonchalantly remarks that it is like a cliché event used to introduce a childhood love interest. Shin, clearly overwhelmed, adds that he doesn't even understand what she's saying anymore. Surya calmly continues, explaining that the girl who saves the cat will enroll in his school, and that girl is the heroine they have been talking about. She adds a bit more detail, explaining that the cat will be named Kuro because of its black fur, and that the heroine is definitely also reincarnated. To top it off, Surya mentions that the heroine is another reincarnated Japanese person who has played the game just like her. She insists there is no mistake in that. Shin, still grappling with the bizarre nature of the conversation, asks why Surya thinks this. She explains that in their country, the Japanese word for black is kuro, which is the same name given to the black cat in the game. After that, she asks if he trusts her now. Shin, looking like someone who's forced to face reality, admits that he can no longer deny it. Just then, Belle, Surya's maid, enters the room, apologizing for the wait as she brings in the tea. Lowering his voice, Shin whispers to Surya, asking her if she has told anyone else about this strange situation. Surya replies that she has thought about telling him everything before the engagement happened. Shin looks at her thoughtfully and says that he understands. He promises he will make a formal offer of engagement at a later date. Surya is confused by his sudden words. With a nod, he adds a polite thank you to Miss Surya and suggests that they enjoy the tea together. Turning his attention to the maid, Shin casually mentions that he has a lot of fun chatting with Miss Surya and points out that during their conversation, she has never once lied. He adds that she seems like a suitable person to be his wife, and he hopes they will spend the rest of the time together. Surya is absolutely befuddled. Looking back at Surya, Shin smiles, saying that he was looking forward to talking with her more. Then, in a gesture of sincerity, he takes her hand and thanks her for taking the time to see him while she was still recovering. He wishes her a speedy recovery and hopes she feels better soon. Before leaving, Shin promises that they would meet again and he would come to visit her as often as she wishes. He says this with a kind smile, signaling his genuine concern. Outside, Shin finds himself in front of the Duke, Surya's father. With a polite tone, he thanks the Duke for allowing him to visit his daughter. Then, with an air of formality, he proudly announces that he will make sure to continue having similar talks later. Finally, he meets Shurigan, who chimes in, teasing Shin by saying that he was making a lot of noise and asking if he had done something wrong. After getting a confirmation for the engagement, Shurigan, ever the enthusiastic one, shouts a congratulatory message, noting that this engagement would bring the royal family and the Duke's family much closer. Shin inwardly sighs, thinking to himself that Shurigan probably just wanted a reason to meet Miss Belle the maid. Without showing much emotion, Shin suggested they quickly head home before they cause more of a fuss. But of course, Shurigan, always thinking with his stomach, holds a cake and insists on eating it first because Miss Belle had given it to him. Shin, trying to wrap things up, tells him to hurry up and eat it. Eventually, Shin returns to the castle to inform the king of the engagement. After hearing Shin's story, the king responds, saying that it is good that Shin has already chosen his fiancée as it is a painstaking process. The king praises Shin. Shin, feeling the weight of his decision, admits that he has yet to receive Miss Surya's approval herself. The king, unfazed, tells him not to worry, as there was no way she would say no, was already settled in the king's mind. Shin's thoughts grew more troubled as he realizes that Surya didn't seem to have much of a say in this matter. The weight of it all hits him and he feels like he had made a very cold-hearted decision for both of them. He wonders what would have happened if Surya hadn't remembered her past life that day. What if, after hearing her story, he had refused the engagement? The what if swirled in his mind, but in the end, Shin believes that the outcome would have been the same no matter what. He ponders the future, questioning whether he could truly make her happy or if he would make her sad instead. But ultimately, Shin knew that it is all up to him. He will have to do his best from now on. In a quiet room, Shin sits beside his sister, Saran. He shares the news with her, telling her that his engagement to Surya has been decided. Saran, with a teasing tone, responds, saying that now Shin also has a fiancé. Shin smiles at her as Saran continues, asking if Surya is a cute child. Shin nods and replies, saying that Surya's black hair is beautiful, and even though she is a little nervous, he feels that she is well-mannered and polite. Saran, hearing this, feels reassured and remarks that it is great news. She expresses how knowing this makes her feel more at ease about getting married herself. Shin then asks Saran if she knows a similar story. He begins explaining to her how his first meeting with Surya went. Saran thinks for a moment and mentions that it sounds like a story of a noble marrying a commoner, like a Cinderella story. She adds that she hasn't seen such a story in novels or plays before. Continuing, she speculates that if there were a novel about a noble or royal marrying a commoner purely out of love, it would likely be banned and burned. Reflecting on the tale, Saran muses that if Cinderella's prince were already engaged, he wouldn't have sought out Cinderella in the first place. Then, Saran wonders aloud if perhaps Surya, the child in question, has read a story like that and believes that her own engagement would be broken. Shin looks at her as she says this, and she confirms that it does seem that way. She adds that a story like that could happen at the academy. She recalls a time when, upon entering Flora Academy, her father told her that those who pass through its gates disregard their social status. Following this principle, she may live freely with commoners. Saran mentions, however, that the hospital Surya sees in her dream doesn't exist in their country. She explains that the only hospital was built after her return from studying abroad. Before that, doctors used to visit patients at their homes for treatment. Shin, thinking about all this, reflects on how, if what Saran speaks of has indeed come from a novel or story, then there might be something similar in their world. However, neither his sister nor the maids know about such a tale. He isn't sure Surya's story is just a delusion, but there are many things he can't explain. He decides that moving forward, he needs to meet and speak with her, often to understand more. Saran looks at Shin and reminds him that he is only 10 years old and already feeling nervous about his prospective bride. She advises him to keep Surya at ease by adoring, cherishing, and giving her lots of love. Taking Shin's hand, Saran reassures him that feeling anxious about marriage at his age is natural. She explains that if he shows her affection, Surya will smile and become his bride. She emphasizes the importance of being her ally, never betraying her, and even becoming her knight. Shin quietly says okay, then thinks to himself about how his childhood wish to become a knight is probably due to his sister's influence. Yes, he is sure that must be the reason. He then resolves that since he has heard Surya's health has improved, he will depart with Shurigan in the morning to visit her.
Here I am, know it's been a while. I was in denial about my love. Here I stand, I know I walked away.